No one knew where she came from. She walked into the village at dusk, barefoot, dust swirling around her ankles, with nothing but a wooden staff and a scar that ran from her cheekbone to her collar. Her name was Naki. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She asked one question to the gathering crowd of men at the village square. Which one of you is the strongest? Laughter erupted, not from joy, from arrogance. The blacksmith flexed his arms. The hunters exchanged looks. The chief's son stepped forward, shirtless, muscles gleaming with pride. "I am," he said. She nodded once. "Then you will fall first." No one moved, until Naki did. With a flash of motion, her staff struck the ground, the air cracked, and the chief's son was flat on his back, eyes wide, breath gone. The silence that followed was thicker than smoke. She turned to the others. "I will fight you all," she said, "one by one, until none of you doubt what a woman's body can hold." No one believed her, but by nightfall, 7 men lay in the dirt, and Naki hadn't even raised her voice. By the second day, the village was no longer laughing. Naki stood at the edge of the square, waiting. She didn't speak. She didn't challenge anyone. She just stood. And that silence was louder than any war drum. The men gathered again, this time more cautious. Some came with clubs, others with knives. One even carried a charm, blessed by the priest, meant to weaken her will. But it didn't matter. Naki moved like water through fire, fluid, controlled, inevitable. For every swing, she had an answer. For every insult, a bruise. For every threat, a lesson carved into the ribs of her opponents. She never aimed to kill, only to remind. One man claimed she was possessed. Another said she had been trained by desert spirits. A third whispered she was vengeance in human skin. But the women? They watched with something different in their eyes. Not fear, not doubt, but hope. By sunset, Naki had bested 13 men. She didn't rest, didn't eat, just drank a single gourd of water and stared at the horizon. A girl approached her, barely 10. "My mother says they beat her too," the girl whispered. "Can you beat them for her?" Naki knelt. "Tell her I already did." And that night, not a single man walked the village with his chest raised. On the third day, it wasn't just the village watching. Strangers gathered at the border, travelers, traders, men from neighboring towns who had heard whispers of the woman who was breaking bones and breaking pride. Some came to witness, others came to test her. One called himself the Leopard, a war veteran, scarred from 3 campaigns. He laughed when he saw Naki, called her girl, and said he'd end the myth before it grew too big. He charged. He didn't last a minute. She shattered his stance, disarmed him, left him face first in the dust, muttering prayers to gods he hadn't spoken to in years. It wasn't just the strength, it was how she moved, like she'd fought these men in her dreams for years, like their blows were familiar, old, slow. Each fall shifted something in the crowd. The women stood taller, the girls leaned forward, and the men, they stopped whispering, started wondering. By nightfall, no one stepped forward to fight, not out of fear, out of shame, because Naki hadn't humiliated them, she had exposed them. The next morning, the chief finally stepped out of his compound, old, proud, wrinkled with stubbornness, and he said, "If you are here to lead, then say it." Naki turned. "I'm not here to lead," she said. "I'm here to wake you up. If Naki's strength is shaking something in you, subscribe and tap the bell, because what she's really fighting isn't muscle, it's memory, and it runs deep." The chief didn't fight her. He simply turned and walked away, back into his compound, leaving the village square more silent than it had ever been. That night, something strange happened. Women began to gather, not in secret, not in fear, in the open. They formed a circle around Naki, young, old, scarred, bruised, tired, but with fire in their eyes. One by one, they told their stories, of fists behind closed doors, of meals eaten in silence, of names forgotten in marriage, and Naki listened to each word, her staff planted firmly in the earth. Then she asked only one question: who will fight next? Not the men, the women. They trained with her at dawn, moved together like wind in tall grass, no longer walking behind, but beside. Some laughed for the first time in years. Some wept as they punched the ground. Some simply breathed, deep, free. The men didn't stop them, because deep down, they knew this was long overdue. That night, drums echoed through the hills, but not for celebration, for mourning. The village was burying the idea that strength belonged to one side of the body. The next morning, the chief's compound was empty, and Naki, she stood in the center of the square, alone, waiting again. By the 5th day, Naki didn't have to fight anymore. Her presence was the battle, her silence, the blade. Men began approaching her not with weapons, but with questions. How do I unlearn what I was taught? What does it mean to protect, not control? Can broken hands still build something better? She answered with action, not speeches. She helped repair the widow's roof, taught boys how to grow food, not fists. And when a drunk trader struck his wife in the open, Naki didn't raise her staff. She simply turned, looked him dead in the eye and said, "Do it again, but to me." He couldn't. His hand trembled, then dropped. He wept on his knees, because the truth was heavier than pain. Word of the village spread far. People came from days away, not to fight, but to learn. They called it the place where women stand. No longer a village, a asterisk symbol. And Naki, she never claimed power. She simply reminded everyone where it had always been buried. In bruises, in silence, in still hearts waiting to beat like drums. Naki left at dawn. No farewell, no ceremony, just a trail of bare footprints leading into the fog. But she didn't take her staff. She left it standing in the center of the village square, planted deep in the soil, wrapped with strips of cloth from every woman she trained. A monument, not of war, but of awakening. The village never returned to what it was, because it had become something else. Girls now raced boys in the fields. Wives sat beside husbands at the council table. And no man raised a hand without first looking at his reflection. The stories of Naki became legend. Some say she walks from village to village, carrying no name, only questions. Others believe she was never real, just the spirit of every woman who was ever told, "You can't." But the women of that village, they know better, because they still hear her voice, carried in the wind every time they train in the square. Strength was never about muscle. It was about who kept getting up. If Naki came to your village, what would you ask her? Would you challenge her or follow her lead? Drop your answer below. Still feeling the fire? Watch. She used her pubic hair to make food and sell it. Next, the power behind her pot might surprise you.